continuing our reading from The Breathless, Dark Ripples, Part 1. Chapter 3, Transition. It's as if some invisible puzzle piece has just slid into its proper place at last. Greg and Nadia have been engaged for almost 6 months, and the lease is up on her flat. She says it's time they find a new place and move in together. It's a bit sooner than Greg had expected, to be honest, but he's game for whatever she wants to do. Until he remembers Sherlock. How will I handle this? He wonders as he begins to fill boxes in his flat. It's not as if I can just tell her out of the blue. He had considered it, of course. During the peaceful early years of their relationship, he'd nearly blurted it out more than once, while he was delirious with post-coital bliss, relaxed and in the mood for storytelling. It had seemed just as plausible a topic of discussion as the confession that his sister had enjoyed dressing him up in her old clothes when he was 4. So, well, get this. Sometimes I have to take a break from breathing to save this little kid's life with the power of my mind. No, it's definitely a good thing that Greg had managed to still his wagging tongue on those occasions. In all this time, he's been fortunate enough that he's dealt with only 3 ripples in her presence. 3 times in nearly 5 years isn't a bad average at all, considering the overall frequency with which he's experienced them. It helps that he's placed such importance on improving his skills at evasion and escape. Or maybe Nadia's a lucky charm. Greg hopes that's the case, really. Those damned bullies have remained persistent, and there's still nearly a month left in the summer term. It's becoming an ongoing strategy game, one that's been a relentless distraction at the edge of Greg's thoughts during his patrol shifts. Just as Sherlock has apparently changed his habits, the other boys have varied their plan of attack. By extension, it's forced the unseen player in their dangerous game to find new ways to accomplish his duty. Sherlock begins to duck out through the kitchens after the evening meal. Big Nose and his gang catch him at it the second or third time around. Greg brings the burly school dishwasher in from his cigarette break early. Sherlock finds a window niche in a disused stairwell, a quiet place to sit and read. The gang corners him with no innocent bystanders anywhere around to interfere. With effort, Greg manages to get into the head of one of the backup boys, pushing him just enough to make a foot slip, and the group is distracted by his painful tumble down the stairs. Greg feels badly about that one, but only a little. His ripples don't allow him access to see the aftermath of these incidents, or the lead up to them. He has no way of asking Sherlock if he's okay, of coaching him on ways to try verbally diffusing bad situations, of walking him across to a nurse's office and waiting while they make sure he's not suffered cracked ribs or worse. And while it's a sorely tempting idea to finally search out his charge, to travel across the city or across the country to put an end to these kids' awful game in person, the fact remains that it's just not feasible. What possible excuse could he give the school officials to justify knowledge that he's got no logical means of having? And what about young Sherlock himself? What could he possibly say to the boy that would make any sense at all? He thinks sometimes about what he'd like to say. Hi, so, I know you don't know me, but stop almost fucking dying so much, okay? It's getting bloody difficult to deal with. 2 days before the move, Greg sees a barber for a close-cropped buzz. It's begun to be more noticeable on the mornings he wakes with a brand new swath of silver, and some of the guys at the station have started making cracks about old man Lestrade. There's enough there now that he probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference in the mirror if his gain were still a single hair each time, but gone are the comparatively easy days of Sherlock's early childhood. The shorter his hair, he figures, the less comment he'll draw as it keeps changing in sudden fingernail-sized patches. He hates the result, but pretends it's exactly what he wanted. Nadia hates it too and makes him promise to let it grow out. He agrees somewhat reluctantly, already thinking about other ways he might disguise the evidence of his secret. A few weeks later, he stands bewildered before a selection of hair dyes at the chemist's until a rosy-cheeked shop assistant takes pity on him and helps him choose the right shade of mustache touch-up color. When Greg returns to the new flat, his fiancée is still at work. Her company is catering a special event and she won't return till late. He takes the bag from the chemist into the loo. The new hair gel he puts away in the medicine cabinet. He hides the other little box in a Tupperware container and submerges it in the toilet tank. In case of emergency, it's always worth it to be prepared. Christmas rolls around and another school term is through without notable incident. It's funny, really, in a macabre sort of way, that a term during which Sherlock's life is threatened only 6 or 7 times can be considered a good one. Greg suspects his expectations have become a bit skewed. Greg's mum visits London for 3 days before the holiday. She and Nadia spend the time exchanging recipes and nattering on about wedding things. His sister Corey and her American husband, Pat, have moved away to New York, but she sends Greg a little photo album full of his 2-year-old nephew Michael's exploits. On Christmas Day, Nadia's mother gives Greg a pocket watch that had once belonged to her late husband. Baba Kazmina has knitted him a hat in pale gray wool, speckled all over with black, and she chortles that she's seeing the future when he tries it on. He laughs and agrees that she's likely not far off. Greg wonders what's under the tree for the youngest in the Holmes household. He wonders, too, what it is that Sherlock wants to be when he grows up. He doesn't have a terribly clear picture of the boy's interests, of course, beyond chemistry, which is obvious. His other academic pursuits are so far not as likely to kill him, and are therefore invisible. But Greg's been practicing his visual acuity, setting up tests for himself to try and increase the amount of detail he's able to recall from his brief ripples. He knows he's seen piles of thick texts, ranging from advanced maths and anatomy to geology and mythology, many clearly not part of the standard study materials for most schools. There's a violin case, too, and stacks of sheet music that change from ripple to ripple. Greg finds himself wishing he could hear Sherlock play. He imagines the boy must be brilliant at it. The wedding takes place on the first Saturday in July. It rains. They honeymoon in western Romania. It's a chance to visit members of Nadia's extended family along the way, most of whom had last seen her as an infant if they'd met her at all. Over a long weekend, they stay with a cousin in a tiny strip of a village southeast of Timisoara. The single road is paved with gravel and lined with fragrant plum trees, heavy with fruit. Greg smiles and nods, repeats a few broken phrases, clutches Dia's hand and whispers thanks when she saves him from floundering conversations. One of the eldest great aunts stares at him and doesn't stop staring for most of their 3-day visit. Greg catches her out of the corner of his eye once, when no one else is near, moving her hand at her waist in what he assumes is some kind of quick warding sign. When he turns back, she is wiping bony fingers on her embroidered apron instead, eyeing him warily. He returns his most winning smile. In the heat of the afternoon, Greg walks south to the end of the road, facing away from the string of homes in the faraway city beyond. He stares out across dry-looking fields scattered with scrubby trees and telegraph poles, squints into the white glare of patchy clouds, and thinks about his life. He thinks about Sherlock. For a long while, he stands there, lost in his mind. Eventually, there's a scuffing sound in the dirt behind him, and then Nadia slips her arms around his waist from behind. "Penny for your thoughts," she murmurs into his shoulder, tucking her chin alongside his cheek to follow his gaze. Honesty walks a dangerous line, so he pulls out another answer. "I was thinking about work." "That's the last thing you should be thinking about all the way out here, I dare say." "Well, I had to take a break from thinking about those bloody squeaky bed springs in Andre's spare room," he jokes, shifting to pull her forward under his arm. She giggles. "Tomorrow night in Bucharest we'll have a hotel room again, dear husband, and Tanti Georgetta can complain all she likes after we go. So what's this about work, then? Would it upset you if I took a transfer?" "Depends. What sort of transfer?" I need to buckle in for another 2 years of training, but I've been thinking that criminal investigations would be a good fit for me. There'd be a pay rise at the end of it. Isn't that department a bit dangerous, love? Greg bends and plucks up a fat bloom of Queen Anne's lace, nearly the size of a tea saucer. When he turns to tuck it into her dark hair, her eyes catch his, wide and earnest. Could be, he allows, carefully adjusting the flower above her ear. That's what I joined up for, dear, not traffic tickets. Wanted to help people, wanted to save lives. Then you should put yourself in a position to do that, she tells him. Greg smiles and kisses his new wife under the vast, quiet sky. He feels a sense of relief sweeping through him, unexpected and intense. It's as if some invisible puzzle piece has just slid into its proper place at last.